must have asked my son 6 or 7 times to put his pajamas on tonight before he finally did it, which is not an uncommon occurrence, as I'm sure is true for a lot of parents of a 7-year-old. And it's pajamas, it's eat your breakfast, it's clean your room. These things happen all the time where I find myself repeating, trying to get him to do something, until eventually where it gets to a point where I'm yelling and, people, he's getting punished and timeouts and all that stuff. And it always makes me wonder, like, what's going on there? Like, it's so frustrating. It happens all the time. And it just doesn't, I don't understand why it's happening. And I'll ask him sometimes, like, why do you make me get to the point where I have to yell? Like, why can't you listen the first time or even the second or third time? Why do I have to get to 7 times of asking you to put your pajamas on before you finally do it? And, part of me, if I'm looking to pass the blame or contribution to that, looks to my son and says, well, part of it is I've taught him to question and not just blindly follow rules, right? To me, it's very important that he understands the why behind everything. And I'm sure there's a little bit of that. You reap what you sow, and there's a component of that where he's not the type of kid, he hasn't been raised in such a way where, like, you get that look and okay, I just blindly do whatever you say now because I'm just compliant. We don't have that, right? And I'm okay with that. There's part of me that also thinks it's a 7-year-old trying to figure it out. They're trying to learn how to run the equations that we run to make our decisions in life. And he's just not that sophisticated at it. So as he's, being told to put his pajamas on, he's also watching a movie, and the movie's a lot of fun. And there's lots of benefits to sticking and watching the movie and keeping that going. And if he stops to put his pajamas on, that's bad. So that cost-benefit analysis that he's doing comes out pretty clearly. Why would I stop watching this movie to put my pajamas on? Like, I'm going to keep going. I'm loving this movie. And he's still figuring out these complex, nuanced costs that aren't actually right in front of him, but they could be there, that you could get in trouble, and, you might get a timeout or, whatever it is. Hidden costs, hidden benefits. That's not something a 7-year-old sees very clearly. So that leads to some of it, right? He's learning that still, and it's a process. And his mind is doing that very basic math more times than it's not. And I'm sure there's truth to that. But probably the inconvenient truth for me that I don't like to face is that a lot of the contribution or blame, or at least a good piece of it, should be pointed at me. Because often what comes with that repetition, with hey, put your pajamas on, put your pajamas on. Hey, I told you already, you need to put your pajamas on now. As I start to raise up, the threat level, I guess, often it comes with empty threats. Hey, if you don't put your pajamas on right now, you're not watching TV anymore. Or, I'll threaten a timeout, or I'll threaten, whatever the thing is. I'll just start to yell, which is just a threatening, menacing thing, which is meant to say, okay, you're in danger right now, right? Not physical, but you're in some sort of danger of getting in trouble if you don't listen. But more times than not, those are empty threats. I don't follow through on those threats, as I think a lot of parents do, but I can only speak for myself. I don't necessarily want to punish him because he hasn't put his pajamas on yet. I don't necessarily want to, send him for a timeout because he didn't eat his breakfast fast enough yet. But I do. I make the threats that I will, and then I don't. So back to that point of he's trying to figure out these calculations and understand the cost side of the equation. More times than not, he's just guessing. He's not actually running the math. It's a guess because it's irrational. It's not logical to him. I'm not giving him good information to process. On a certain day, I might ask him 8 times to put his pajamas on before I get angry. On another day, if I'm in a bad mood or whatever the case may be, it might be 1 or 2 times before it escalates to some sort of punishment. And he's playing a guessing game. And more times than not, again, it ends up being 8 or 9 times. So hearing, you better do it right now, the intended effect of that is, oh shit, I better do whatever he says because the cost side of this equation is just shot up. More times than not, that's fake. There's nothing actually to it. It zeroes out on the cost side, and he thinks, well, I can just keep going with this movie. And you see that in kids, right? Where all of a sudden it just like they almost feel startled, like, oh, I'm in trouble now. I can't even believe that. And to me as the parent, it's, what do you mean? I've asked you 8 times. How do you not know? And we're just perceiving those costs differently because in my mind, where I'm probably lying to myself, I believe my threats. I believe what I'm saying and that, hey, you better listen. And in his mind, it's just, he does that sometimes. No big deal. So I think that inconsistency is really I mean, it's somewhat lifelike, right? Life's not perfect. You're going to get inconsistent inputs. The costs are going to be things you have to assess, and you're not always going to be able to do it clearly. So there's some value in that, but it's almost setting him up for failure in terms of expecting him to understand and know. Because I'll often say that to him, like how like you need to understand when I tell you something in a certain way, like you need to listen. But from his side, he must be thinking like, okay, but how am I supposed to know? There's so many times in which you do that, and it doesn't come to fruition. So those threats I make, I think I need to be a lot more strategic, deliberate, selective in those. And it's laziness to an extent, right? It's easy to throw out a threat. It's harder to actually follow through on it. Um, you know, you feel bad. There's a level of guilt. Well, he just didn't put his pajamas on. Do I really want to punish him for that? Do I really want to give him a timeout? Well, maybe not. But by throwing that threat out there without thinking that through first, you're doing more harm than good. So I think, you know, one of the biggest things I struggle with in parenting are those empty threats. And it's something that I need to be better at. I need to give him consistency so that he can process that information the right way. Give him a chance to get the equation right, to get the calculation right, rather than the approach I take now, where I just leave him guessing.